What happens when loyalty collides with the law? When a president's trusted lawyer is placed in charge of prosecutions and a federal court says, not so fast. This is how a legal technicality detonated into one of the most consequential blows to a presidential staffing strategy in years, and why it could change dozens of criminal cases in New Jersey. You'll hear the courtroom drama, the political theater, the legal rule at the center, the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, and the human stories of prosecutors, defendants, and career Justice Department staff caught in the crossfire. The ruling was unanimous, and its reasoning is surgical. March 2025. In the Oval Office, a swearing-in. A former personal attorney to the president takes an oath and assumes the top federal law enforcement job in New Jersey. For some, it's a celebration. For others, a grave concern: did the appointment follow the law's carefully drawn lines, or did politics push those lines aside? The question moves from headlines into the courtroom. Alina Habba is a private practice lawyer who rose to national attention representing the president. She had not been a long-time career federal prosecutor before taking the New Jersey post. Suddenly that background, or lack of it, becomes central to the debate, not only about experience, but about whether statutory appointment rules were followed. The legal challenge landed in court because criminal defendants asked a judge to disqualify Habba, arguing their indictments were overseen by someone who lacked legal authority to hold the office. That's a serious claim. If true, the authority behind prosecutions can be undone by procedure. The district court granted disqualification for the cases at issue. The government appealed. On the 1st of December 2025, the Third Circuit, a 3-judge panel, upheld the district court. Alina Habba was not lawfully serving as acting U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey. The decision was unanimous and runs about 32 pages. It rested on a single pivotal statute, the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. Imagine the FVRA as a traffic light for the federal appointments process. When a seat is empty, the law spells out who may step in and for how long. The rule protects stability and requires that certain senior officials, like the Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney, be replaced through predictable legal steps. The court found Habba's path to the top jogged around those traffic rules. Key moments: Habba was sworn in as interim U.S. attorney in late March 2025. In June, the president formally nominated her for the permanent post. The Senate did not act on that nomination. When the interim term expired under the FVRA, district judges in New Jersey designated the then first assistant as acting U.S. attorney. The Justice Department then removed that first assistant and attempted a sequence of maneuvers to reinstall Habba, including appointing her as special attorney with powers intended to mirror those of a U.S. attorney. The appeals court found that sequence violated the FVRA's limits. Here's the twist that made this more than a bureaucratic spat. Criminal defendants argued their cases were tainted by an invalid appointment. That argument, whether successful or not, threatens the continuity of prosecutions for serious offenses. The consequences ripple far beyond one office. This is not just institutional. On the docket were drug trafficking, firearms, wire fraud, and money laundering cases. For victims, investigators, and communities, the speed and certainty of prosecutions matter. For defendants, the legal authority behind those prosecutions matters too. The court's decision aims to protect the law's procedural guardrails, but in the short term it also raises uncertainty for pending trials. The administration argued the steps it took were lawful and necessary, framing the dispute as part of a broader battle over presidential prerogative to staff the executive branch. The Justice Department pushed back against the idea that these maneuvers hollow out the president's authority. The court disagreed. The judges focused on 3 legal points. First, who qualifies to be an acting officer under the FVRA, and when that person must already have been the first assistant. Second, the FVRA disqualifies someone who has been nominated to the permanent post from serving as acting officer during the relevant statutory window. Third, the Attorney General cannot bypass the FVRA's exclusivity by delegating all powers to a special attorney. Together, these rules form a statutory fence, and the court concluded the administration jumped the fence. This ruling didn't arise in a vacuum. Similar challenges have popped up across the country in Virginia, Nevada, and California, where interim appointments have been contested and, in some cases, allowed to disrupt high-profile prosecutions. The Third Circuit's decision adds a strong appellate precedent that will be cited in other suits and could push more disputes toward the Supreme Court. Reactions split along predictable lines. Some lawmakers praised the ruling as an affirmation of statutory checks. Others framed it as judicial overreach. But beyond partisan sound bites, many experts see the decision as a protection of constitutional process. The Senate's advice and consent role exists for a reason. What happens next? The Department of Justice can seek rehearing by the full Third Circuit or appeal to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court may decline, but if it accepts review, any ruling would set a national rule on how far administrations may go to keep chosen deputies in place without Senate confirmation. Meanwhile, the Justice Department must appoint a new prosecutor to supervise New Jersey cases while the legal dust settles. At first glance, this may look like legal hair splitting, but procedure is the backbone of legitimacy. When government appointments ignore statute, the result isn't only technical, it undermines trust. Courts do not relish tossing prosecutions on procedural grounds, but they will when the statute is clear and the rule of law is at stake. This ruling is a reminder, but to understand how we reached this moment and why this ruling matters so much, we need to go deeper, because this case didn't appear out of thin air. It's part of a bigger pattern, a clash of two powerful forces, executive authority and legal procedure. Two forces that have been colliding not just in New Jersey, but across the entire country. For years, administrations of both parties have stretched the boundaries of temporary appointments, but what happened in 2025 pushed those boundaries to the breaking point. At the center of the storm was a simple but powerful idea. You can't run the justice system on shortcuts. Let's break down why the courts reacted so sharply. First, the federal judiciary saw something unusual, a rapid reshuffling of leadership in a major U.S. attorney's office. The first assistant, they saw it as a direct attempt to bypass Congress, bypass the Senate confirmation process, and bypass the Constitution's separation of powers. And here's the part many people miss. The court wasn't just protecting legal procedure. It was protecting legitimacy, the idea that justice must not only be done, but must be seen to be done. Because imagine this. If defendants can argue that the person overseeing their indictments wasn't legally allowed to hold that office, what happens to those cases? What happens to public trust? What happens to victims waiting for justice? These aren't small questions. They cut straight to the heart of the justice system. And that's why the Third Circuit's ruling is so important. But the story expands even further. Across the country, similar battles are unfolding. In Virginia, in Nevada, in California, the same pattern appears. Interim appointments, controversial maneuvers, legal challenges. In one case, indictments were thrown out entirely. In another, prosecutions were halted midstream. Legal scholars say we may be witnessing the beginning of a historic re-examination of how acting officials are appointed. Because while presidents often talk about policies, budgets, or foreign affairs, the quiet machinery of government, the people who run departments day to day, may be the president's most enduring legacy. That's why these appointments matter so much. That's why the FVRA exists. And that's why courts are now stepping in. As for New Jersey, the fallout is only beginning. Dozens of federal criminal cases will need new supervision. Some will proceed smoothly, others may face delays. Defense attorneys will scrutinize every procedural step. Prosecutors will need to re-review decisions. The DOJ must appoint someone with unquestioned authority, someone who meets every statutory requirement to stabilize the office. Meanwhile, political pressure is rising in Washington. Allies of the administration argue this ruling undermines the president's control over the executive branch. Critics say it proves that guardrails still matter even in polarized times. And there's one more twist. Some legal experts believe this case is headed for the Supreme Court, not because the outcome is unclear, but because the question is so fundamental. How far can a president go in appointing temporary officials? When does flexibility become violation? Where is the line between executive power and statutory limits? The Supreme Court may soon be asked to answer those questions. And whichever way it rules, the decision could shape American governance for decades. This is the real story, not just about one attorney, not just about one appointment, but about the integrity of institutions and the future of how justice is administered in the United States. So yes, the story is far from over. In many ways, it's only just beginning.